Nowadays, sabotaging in Dead by Daylight is mostly a niche mechanic, which can sometimes come in clutch, but is generally not very useful. What if I told you, however, that during the early days of the game's existence, sabotaging was one of the most overpowered things that survivors could do? Well, in this video we're going to be taking a look at how the sabotage mechanic has evolved and all the changes that have been made to it throughout Dead by Daylight's history. The Saboteur perk has been in the game ever since its release on the 14th of June 2016. Originally, the perk's icon showed a bear trap instead of a hook. We'll get to that in a little bit. Saboteur allowed you to sabotage hooks without a toolbox at 80% the normal speed, which at that time was around 20 seconds. During the action, you would also receive skill checks, which when failed would reduce the action's progress by a whopping 25%. Additionally, Saboteur would increase the toolbox sabotage speed. This, in all honesty, is even worse than the version of the perk we're used to today. But something that is not mentioned in the perk's description is that sabotaging a hook would destroy it for the entire remaining part of the match. Yes, the ability for hooks to respawn hadn't been introduced yet, and this was a conscious design decision by the developers. For the first few months of Dead by Daylight's existence, sabotaging was actually meta. Survivors would load into the match with their toolboxes and saboteurs and would begin sabotaging every single hook, until the only hooks left were the ones in the basement, which to this day still can't be tampered with. This led to most killers running Iron Grasp and Agitation just so they could be able to reach the basement without the survivor wiggling off. However, even with both of these perks equipped, the killer wasn't always able to reach the basement, which just led to a whole bunch of frustration and slugging. Now let's get on to why the icon for the Saboteur perk showed a bear trap instead of a hook. You might have already guessed it, but you were able to sabotage Trapper's traps. And much like hooks, they wouldn't respawn. Trapper even had addons that reduced the speed at which survivors sabotage his traps. Keep in mind that this was during a time when trappers set traps much slower, couldn't hold more than one trap at once, and couldn't even reset traps. Trapper's state was questionable back then, to say the least. Anyways, I got a little sidetracked there, let's get back into the video. The first change that was made to the Saboteur perk was during patch 1.0.2, only 2 weeks after the game's release. This was a simple number change, making it so that Saboteur now sabotaged at 50% normal speed. Of course, a small tweak wasn't enough to discourage survivors from using the perk, and the Sabotage playstyle remained one of the most popular build choices for the next couple of months. The Sabotage meta finally came to an end during patch 1.5.0, when the ability for sabotaged hooks to respawn was implemented. Originally, the time it took for them to repair themselves was 180 seconds. Furthermore, the time to sabotage a hook was reduced to 15 seconds, whereas previously it was 20, and the missed skill check penalty was also lowered from 25 to 10%. As the developers thought that 25% regression for a missed skill check was quite extreme, and in all honesty it probably is. In light of the new hook repair implementations, the numbers on the Iron Grasp perk were also changed. As you might have guessed, this patch was generally quite well received by the killer community, but not so much by survivor mains. Not only had one of the most powerful playstyles been nerfed, but the update also brought in many other killer buffs, such as the introduction of the Bloodlust mechanic. Some survivor players even said that escaping would become close to impossible, and that killers would always get easy 4Ks. This, of course, wasn't the case, it was just that the survivor community wasn't used to receiving such massive nerfs at once. Moving on to the next set of changes that were made to the sabotage mechanic, patch 2.1.0 finally added the ability for bear traps to respawn, while 2.3.0 implemented a sort of mini rework to the Saboteur perk. The efficiency bonus was removed, as toolboxes no longer featured an efficiency penalty. The sabotage speed was made to be 50% across all tiers, and the penalty to the size of the skill check success zone was also removed. Furthermore, the perk now caused sabotaged hooks or traps to take longer to auto-repair. I also have to mention that Hangman's Trick was added around this time, which was the first ever perk that was designed to specifically counter the sabotage playstyle. All of these changes were, however, pretty minor compared to those made in the 3.6.0 update. This was a full rework to the sabotage mechanic. First of all, the time for a sabotaged hook to repair itself was vastly reduced to 30 seconds from the previous 180. However, the time to sabotage a hook was also drastically lowered to 3 seconds, and the action's progress would now reset to 0 whenever the player stopped sabotaging the hook. This ensured that Saboteur would only be used when the killer was already carrying a survivor. Skill checks were also removed from the interaction, as they were no longer needed for such a short action. Furthermore, the Saboteur perk was also completely reworked. The new description read, "See hook auras in a radius of 56 meters from the pickup spot if a survivor is being carried. Unlocks the ability to sabotage hooks without a toolbox. Sabotaging a hook without a toolbox takes 2.5 seconds. The sabotage action has a cooldown of 60 seconds. This patch also made it so that bear traps could no longer be sabotaged, as it was quite unfair that only Trapper's power could be countered in such a way. Saboteur's icon was updated in order to reflect this change, and Hangman's Trick also received a slight rework. Overall, 3.6.0 was in general quite well received by both the killer and survivor community, as it addressed some problems that had been in the game for quite a while, and also brought some interesting new content. The last update to the Saboteur perk was actually done fairly recently during the 6.1.0 patch. It was now made so that Saboteur would also show the auras of Scorch hooks in yellow, therefore making it easier to identify them and potentially counter perks like, for example, Pain Resonance and Floods of Rage. Well, I guess that's it. We went through the entire history of the sabotage mechanic in Dead by Daylight. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, then consider liking it and subscribing, since that makes me happy. But anyways, thanks for watching and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!